Good afternoon, folks. We are up and running and ready to roll. So let me get everything switched over and turned on, and we will kick off today's jam stream. All right. Let me tweak a couple things with my audio settings here. I always forget how jarringly different my jam stream settings are compared to everything else. I'm hoping to fix that in the short term so it won't be quite so annoying to switch everything around. But for now, it works okay. All right, we've got main audio on, loop station audio's on. Let me pump this up a little bit. And I threw together a real quick loop before we went live today, so I'm going to put that in the background and we kind of talk about the plan for today's jam stream. All right, hopefully that's not too loud. So today is going to be kind of a straightforward agenda like we've done before. There is some stuff I wanted to talk about on the technique and sound theory portion of the stream today. As you can tell from the stream description, we'll be looping back to our ongoing discussion of technicality, techniques, and sort of building on some of the things we've talked about in the previous sessions. We'll do that for a bit, kind of talk about how it flows into some of the practice drills and stuff that I've been working with lately. And then we'll be doing like kind of a standard BGM brainstorming session today. It's not going to be like a BGM rush style like we've done before. Kind of like the last stream, it's going to be standard format. See how many we can work through, how many ideas we have. And that should fill out our time here on Beatbox Jam Stream. Well, to start, as we always do, we'll be doing a bit of warm-up and some sort of freestyle practicing drills. And then from there, we'll go into technique and sound theory. Okay, let's wipe this one off the file and save it. I'll move the stream here so I can see it a little bit better. And we will commence warm-ups, and it'll be a good chance for me to sound check everything as usual. So let's go ahead and get started. Throat's getting dry. Grab a drink real quick. Hey, Red Dragon's here. What's up, Red Dragon? How you doing today? Welcome to the jam stream. We are just getting started, running through some warm-ups and freestyle drills. And then from here, we're going to move on to technique and sound theory discussion. And then, as usual, we'll be getting the BGM brainstorming a little bit later. Red Dragon says, doing okay, you? I'm doing all right. I had a lot of things I was planning on getting done today, and then I slept through one of my alarms and didn't end up getting those things done. Woke up kind of close to the stream, which I don't like to do since I have a lot of things I need to set up beforehand. But other than that, I'm doing all right. Can't really complain. I'll have to get the important things done once we wrap up on the stream today. So before we move on to technique and sound theory, one thing I want to try and spend a little bit of time talking about in the intro warm-up section, since to me it seems like the best place to kind of bring up the conversation when it comes to warming up and the initial sort of ramp up for beatboxing. And that's kind of leading into the idea of how you warm up, which we've talked about a little bit in the past. It's not really a new discussion. But as I was running through just the brief couple beats before, I started thinking about, for people who are interested in learning beatboxing, what would be good recommendations for how to structure warm-ups, since the mouth anatomy, like any other type of muscle or anything active, does require some time to kind of warm up and get used to whatever you're doing for beatboxing, especially if you woke up within the last hour, which is, I guess, an on-topic example. Our Dragon says, woke up here at 2 p.m. Yeah, I can relate to that. It seems like unless I have a specific obligation I need to wake up for, on the weekends specifically, my body just doesn't want to get out of bed. I got to work on that. Maybe go to sleep earlier. It's hard since I'm usually up working on things late at night. And it's usually stuff I don't have time for during the day because I'm working at my regular job during the day. So I'm working on all my non-job stuff at night. And as a result, going to bed stupid late. I don't keep a very good sleep schedule, which is not good. I know. I'm working on it. So in thinking about, again, ideas and strategies and recommendations for how to warm up, it doesn't have to be anything really that complicated to me, but you're definitely going to want to work in types of exercises when you're starting cold, having not done any beatboxing before. Like, let's say you literally woke up and we're going to be doing some beatboxing, so all your muscles are cold, essentially. I think the first place to start would be anything that's going to start warming up, like the lips, because for the core components of beatboxing, if your lips aren't ready to go because they make a lot of the basic sounds, then it's going to be a challenge. Red Dragon says, I know that feeling and better not be late next Saturday. Yeah, I'll make sure I set a couple alarms, Red Dragon, because I think we're going to have to coordinate a little bit before the go live time just to make sure stuff's working. So I will make sure I don't stand you up. And if I do, it definitely wouldn't be on purpose, but no worries there. So when I say thinking about things that kind of emphasize warming up on different specific parts of the anatomy, talking about the lips specifically, I think it's pretty standard for any beats to include kicks. So saying make sure you include kicks in a warm-up beat is probably not necessary to mention. But I think starting with simple complexity patterns for kicks and then kind of ramping them up to be a little bit more advanced as part of the warm-up is a good idea. When I started the freestyle beats at the beginning today, I started with kind of like a dance, electronic-ish type of rhythm with steady kicks, just a And just like you would build a techno house or like a dance type beat, I added in hats. And what snare did I use? PF snare. But building in all of those things as you sort of start ramping up, as it were, is a good place to start. And then after a while, you start adding complexity. So instead of just the maybe start doubling up or adding variation to the kick pattern. So it might go from just the to like a and obviously you're going to be doing that while continuing the rest of the instrument layers on top. And I think that's going to help you again start pushing all of your anatomy to be warmed up faster rather than starting really basic and slow and not really branching out from there. I think everyone's different, and I'd be curious to know for people who are actively learning and trying out what tends to work best. But like one of my old teachers said a long time ago, one thing that is a surefire way to help you get warmed up when it comes to ramping up everything would be to do lip oscillations, because it forces a lot of blood flow to your lips. And if you do nothing else, even if you just did couple minutes of lip oscillation practice, then it's going to greatly warm up your lips a lot. I think it's probably not the best thing to do just by itself, but if you don't have a lot of time to warm up, then that's a good way to do it. And again, lip oscillations are the form of bass that we've talked about before. But while it sounds simple, doing that controlled lip flapping type of sound is causing quite a bit of blood circulation in your face. And back in the day, if I knew I had to warm up, I would just do that for a bit, maybe do some of the BGM snares, like since both those two put a lot of strain on the lips compared to some of the other things. And if you just cycle through that for a few minutes, it'll definitely warm you up. Red Dragon says, didn't know you had teachers. Not plural. I've only studied under one beatboxer before. He was a pro that I took some lessons from a few years ago. I haven't talked to the dude in forever. I kind of wonder how he's doing. But yeah, when I was first starting out in like year 2, I want to say, year and a half, I started taking lessons for a bit from a professional, and he helped me out a lot. He's the one who helped me crack the code of my lip rolls. And yeah, definitely learned a lot. He's a pretty chill dude too. But I would say, in addition to starting to ramp up the complexity of the initial kind of warm-up starter beats, working in some of the other techniques that are going to, again, push anatomy a little bit more than just doing simple sounds is another way to warm up. I didn't really do it in this example, but I have in the past. If you work in things like I did some things with lip rolls, which are good, just and if you want to push things a little bit faster and more strenuously, you can go for the inward lip roll, work that into the beats themselves, because that, again, is forcing a lot of movement through your face muscles and specifically your lips. It is kind of restricted to just the corner because that's how that sound comes out, but it's still going to help, again, circulate blood flow and help your muscles warm up faster. Another thing that I tried working in a little bit, but I'm still refining the sound. It's technically a new combo that I haven't really talked about before, but it's very simple. It's combining a low, hollow lip oscillation with a regular lip roll, a dry lip roll. And to kind of explain that briefly before we sort of segue into the technique and sound theory, the regular lip oscillations I mentioned is a good warm-up, is the one that sounds like, if you're using the power of your lungs to get the air out of your mouth to make that sound, that's what gives it kind of the more oscillating and forceful low end sound. But if you just use mouth pressure, you don't have to breathe at all. Your lungs don't have to factor in at all, but you could still make the sound come out, and it mutes it a little bit, makes it a little softer, but also changes the way it sounds a little bit. And I haven't given this a name. It's just a variation of a lip oscillation, and it sounds like, if you kind of play around with the sound and how it comes out, you can make it sound kind of like a video gamey, like 8-bit or 16-bit type sound, which is kind of fun. I haven't done that in a while, but it's kind of how I learned to play around with the sound a little bit. But if you take the sound and you combine it with the regular lip roll, which sounds like you do them back to back, it creates kind of an interesting combination of putting the two together. And that actually helps warm up a lot because it's forcing your lips to do two different types of motions at once. And if you do that, it sounds like, and again, pretty simple idea. It's nothing really groundbreaking when it comes to combining sounds or sound technique. But if you do that, and even do that back to back and repeat that sound combo multiple times, it will absolutely help you warm up your lips. And it's kind of useful. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it. It works as like a filler sound. But just taking those two things and repeating them over and over again can be pretty useful. And you could put it into a beat, like to illustrate what I'm talking about. Maybe you did something like, and maybe something that's a little bit slower than what I was demonstrating. But even outside of just applying that as a filler sound within a beat, you could just chain those two back to back, and in practice, it's going to help you get control over both sounds anyway, so it is a good thing to drill. And that would just be doing like, I don't work on getting fast with it and see how it changes the sound. I think it's got potential to do some amusing things. I just haven't really been using it as a central sound in beats because it's kind of a new idea that I've been messing around. But to kind of wrap up the discussion on warm-up techniques, I think experimenting around with things that are going to, again, push different parts of the anatomy to get warmed up is a good idea instead of just keeping your warm-up beats very, very simple. If anything, changing both the genres and the instruments that you have in there, like we talked about before for freestyle practicing, just switching things up a little bit as you practice and warm up is probably going to help in the long run. And so I'm going to try and circle back to that discussion whenever we do warm-up stuff in case anything jumps out at me or I come up with something in between that I think would be helpful for people trying to learn. So on that note, let's switch the topic and go into technique sound theory. So for technique and sound theory today, as stated in the stream title on the broadcast, as we usually do every few streams or so, I wanted to come back to the idea of technicality. It's one of my favorite things to talk about in practice. And we'll talk a little bit about some ideas for drills and other things that I'm kind of working on. But this is a little bit of a way to kind of do a status check on the sound development itself. And hopefully it'll be interesting. The problem with talking about technicality is it's a little bit of a complex thing to discuss, for one. But two, it's not something that you see a ton of progression in the short term. In the long term, you see a ton of progression, and it's really easy to sort of see where you started and where you've ended up. But in between, it's kind of hard because it just requires a lot of practice and drilling. And so in every several streams when we talk about it, I know it could be kind of maybe disappointing or not terribly interesting because you're not seeing a night and day difference when it comes to the progression, at least the stuff that I talk about. But it's absolutely worth the grind and the practice to get better at, because the amount of creativity and options for something like technicality is virtually limitless. It's a very interesting facet of beatboxing. And so that's why I like talking about it every few streams. Just again to kind of check in on what we've been doing, and also talk about some ideas for the concepts, especially if I come up with something new. So, which technicality patterns have I been drilling a lot lately? Admittedly, I should probably be doing more with TKKs to get even better or more proficient with them, but they haven't been my main focus. So I'm gonna need to sort of force myself to sit down and grind a little bit more. I do think the chains for the TKK have been getting better. I know that because there's not a big skill disparity between if I don't practice them often and then if I'm practicing them constantly. But at the same time, I'd be a lot more consistent if I drilled them every single day for at least like an hour or two. But we talked about the idea of looping the technicality chain. So that's just doing the same combo set over and over again to have a continuous string of sounds from the drill perspective, but also if you're slotting that into an actual beat for use and application. But if we take the and we just repeat that over and over again, when I first started trying to learn that one a few years ago, because it wasn't the first pattern I learned, it was very difficult to keep that chain going consistently and have it not lose clarity of sound. It would get muddy. And mine still does that if I do it long enough, but I can sustain it more because I've been practicing it more. And so if we take the triplet pattern and we just, again, stitch it end to end as a continuous looping chain, it becomes a and then just slowly over time ramp up the speed like we've talked about before, trying to get that as rapid and as fluid as possible, but not losing the sound integrity. And people out there who've trained a lot in doing that are able to make it sound very, very rapid and employ a lot of really complex nuances in fast beats. We always talk about how technicality is not synonymous with speed, but it's used for a lot of speed patterns. And getting a good mastery over the simple sounds and getting good at chaining them will allow you to work in faster, more complicated things when you're filling in the bits of your overall patterns. So again, if we push the speed on the TKK, for me, let's see, we could just test it here. The fastest I can go on just the triplet loop back to back with no variation in between would be. Problem is I don't like doing it in just a triplet. I like mixing it up with either an FT or a kick in between to help segment the pattern but make it easier to flow into the next chain. So rather than do just a loop, because you don't really do that in beats. You don't do just a loop of sounds unless you're doing a special part of a song. Instead, you're probably going to construct a chain that's going to form the filler, and you want to be able to create that chain as fluidly as possible instead of having to do the loop. The loop is just good practice. It's a good technique to get better at doing that rapid sound over and over again. But the way I sort of practice the TKKs is I'll start with like a kick to start off the whole set, and then alternate things like the kick or like an FT hat in between each triplet. So it's really fours. It's a quadruplet pattern at that point. If it's to me doing like a, it's easier than just, more interesting, not necessarily easier. It's more interesting to me than just doing that. But I practice both off and on. So if we're taking the kind of segmented but constant chain using, let's say, alternating kicks and FT hats, it would sound like, and it's not a continuous loop because you're starting and kind of stopping on the fours or the ones. You're going 1 and then 2, 3, 4 is the technicality, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 is the rest, and it's just changing the sound. So the kick part is the one that goes, and the FT hat is the one that sounds like, and alternates just because it's easier. It's easier, well, not easier, it's just better practice to me because you're starting in sort of different spots on each of those ones. So it's forcing your anatomy to get better at jumping from one to the other. But you could even do something else where you're starting with an initial sound and then creating a longer chain, just maybe not an infinite loop forever, which would sound something like, that's a little more of like a continuous loop chain. It's just not cycling the whole thing over and over again. It's just a variation. And I think practicing all of the different types of variations and just mixing things up is going to give you more of a dynamic tool set when it comes to technicality than just one set of sounds over and over and over again, which we've talked about that a little bit before. And when you're just learning, you're probably going to focus on the core set of sounds you're trying to develop into the sound combos. And then as you branch out and get more comfortable, you start mixing in other things to make more complex chains. And that's the really fun part about the open-endedness with technicality. You, again, have pretty much a limitless amount of combinations and ways you can put the different sounds together to create the sound chains. If we think about a good example, like I've mentioned across the dozens of streams at this point, but the first triplet sound set I learned, which wasn't the TKK, was the TKP, or the TKP. I do it in tons of my beats. It's really, really common technicality go-to for me. But it's different than the you have versus very, very similar, but they use one or two different sounds, thus the sound set sounds different to the ear. But in addition to just doing the rapid TKK chain over and over again, where you have the type sound, I find it more interesting and challenging to try and combine the TKP and the TKK in a way that's causing that sound variation to be a lot more obvious to the listener. And so you might do something like a TKP to TKK, which would just be I gotta think about how that's supposed to sound. The you could even do 3 and 4. I think that's what that is. That's and I didn't think about that. Usually I like to keep my chains even because it's easier to repeat them in an even amount. But depending on how you're slotting into the rhythm, I guess it could be whatever you want. It might not be just filling out a measure of the song. It might be actually filling more than one measure's worth of a gap between different sections. And so you could kind of chop off parts or combine other parts together, again, to customize how the sound set works. And I should probably think about structuring some sort of discussion or lesson on what that looks like, because we haven't really talked about that in a while. We tend to talk a bit about the core sound sets, how to match them up to others, but I didn't think about chopping them apart and kind of rearranging them in different orders. It'd be something like trying to mix in more dramatically different sounds in the sound set. And I think that'd be a useful and interesting thing to talk about, but I'll have to give that some thought. One immediate idea would be trying to go from the hat and the TKK or TKP type sounds to mixing up the pops and the tongue click sounds, which we're going to talk about as part of this discussion today. But that would be a dramatically different type of sound that you're trying to put together, because you have things that are really sharp and fast, like the or the, and then the pop and tongue click combo, pop click combo, or the POTO that we've talked about in the past would be. So taking that and combining it with something with the that would be really hard. And I've messed a little bit with it, and it's not easy. It's very different because of how dramatically different the tongue and mouth positioning is for the different sounds, hence the challenge. But if we want to do something like that's pretty difficult, just because, again, internal mouth position for all of the regular sounds, the TKKs, but then you have an external positioning for the pop. It's just a, and trying to combine that in a way where it flows is pretty challenging. You could go POTO then TKK, because then you're only starting in that position for the first two sounds, and then everything else sort of stays in one spot. And that would sound like It still feels really unnatural because, again, I haven't practiced that. I might have to make that another side note for a future technicality discussion because that's hard. I'll tell you now, it might not sound hard just because the way I'm doing it, but it is difficult to program your brain to try and do that combination of sounds because they're very different. So I'll think about that, and that's not something I intended to talk about today, but it would be an interesting thing to try and develop. Because to kind of segue into the next type of technicality pattern that I've been practicing, the POTO pattern is not, as a concept, really that difficult. It's difficult to get the sound to where it's fast or sound set to where it's fast, but the basic components, which we'll talk about here, are not hard. I think that they're probably beginner sounds that people can learn and refine. I didn't start experimenting with this till literally last year, and I wish I kind of thought about it earlier because I could see a lot of potential. And so the POTO combination that I've sort of denoted for reference for me, I didn't make it up because people have been doing this for a while. But taking just a regular pop sound that you can make with your lips, and combining that with a tongue click that uses the tip of your tongue versus the back of your tongue against the roof of your mouth. The regular standard tongue click sounds like, which is using the middle back part of your tongue, suction on the top of your mouth, and just pulling it down to make that click sound. I think most people know how to do that. Well, the TO type tongue click is different in that it uses the tip of your tongue a little bit further forward on the top of your mouth. So instead of a, it's a, and you use the shape of your lips to create a more hollow exit for the sound, so it sounds more resonant than just a regular one, which sounds sharp. So again, you have a versus a. Hey, Sour Lad's here. What's up, Sour Lad? Welcome to the Jam stream. How's your Sunday going? I had to look at your emote. First, I thought it was like a dinosaur, and then I looked closer, and it's a twerking bear? Some sort of animal gyrating its rear at me. But yes, welcome. So taking the twerking femboy fox question mark. Okay, that's fine. I just had to look closely because I couldn't tell what it was. I got no problem with twerking femboy foxes. So the POTO combo using those two sounds back to back. Slowly, it sounds like pretty simple. Again, this is something that I think anybody can do. The tongue click takes a little bit of getting used to because it's done a little bit differently. But if you can do a regular standard tongue click, it's just using the tip of your tongue a little bit forward to get that. And getting like the ooh mouth positioning is how you get it to resonate a little bit. And the more you practice it, the faster and cleaner it'll become. Because when I first started doing it, I couldn't do it consistently. But the more you practice getting that precise sound to come out, the faster and more accurate you get with it. And you get like you get it pretty rapid. And I'm sure I can get it faster than that. Sarah says, Happy Easter. Yes, happy Easter to folks that observe the holiday. I don't know too much about the religious history because I'm not a religious person, but I'm pretty sure Easter celebrates the day Jesus was hatched out of an egg laid by a rabbit, which is kind of weird, but that's what it says. It's all good. I just know that this is the time of year where they start selling Cadbury cream eggs. That's what I tend to look forward to. Red Dragon says, Happy Zombie Jesus Day. Indeed. I'm sure someone has made that a movie. Maybe Jesus fighting zombies. Vice, an actual zombie Jesus, but it's all good. Okay, So we took the idea of the P, O, and the TO, and how does that sound for the actual technicality chain. So when doing this 2-part chain back to back, you get, that's the kind of 8th note rapid version of it, and then making it faster is where the challenge comes in, because it's on its own not hard, but trying to do it quickly is where the practice and drills come in. So for me, I tend to do it in bursts because, again, doing long chains as part of a beat's not super common. It's mostly practice and drills where you're doing the long back-to-back chain. But if you take and I guess you could think of it like a 4. It's just the 2 sounds repeated in one cycle for 4 total. But taking that and slotting into a beat as like a filler, you might get something like maybe a hip-hop-ish type beat. That was almost a variation of the yellow YouTube theme, I realized. Hopefully it doesn't get me in trouble. But taking them and slotting in as a filler sound for the technicality is pretty handy. And then the more proficient you get with it, the more rapidly you can slot it into things. And again, that takes a lot of practice, and I've been actively working on that one. But I'm really curious to see how far I can develop it. Because you start with just them, and then you can ramp up the speed really fast and shrink down the kind of time between each sound. It's how you're creating that rapid chain. And let's see, what's the fastest I could possibly do with that one. Problem is, when I try and go super fast right now, the sound volume drops. So it actually is more audible and clean if I'm doing it at mid speed or slower. But at some point, as I get better with it, I'll be able to maintain the clarity of sound while doing it at a really rapid, fast pace. And that's sort of the goal. But to kind of get back on track to why I mentioned it, taking that sound and finding ways to link it to other things is kind of the immediate goal for coming up with ideas that are going to be unique and sound unique to the listener. And it's kind of this progression where you need to master the sound and get good at it before you can really experiment with ways to use it. And so for now, to me, it's functioned more like a filler sound. But even if we were to say, try and combine the POTO with one of the TK sounds, either TKK or TKP, you might do something like, maybe take out the first TKK and just go TK. That's not a bad idea. That's a four note chain, but it's very irregular. So jumping between the start and end, if you did that back to back, would be pretty challenging. But maybe I will try and practice that one and see if I can develop it into something useful for putting into beats later. So if you do it in a cycle, we'll do it slowly since I obviously can't do that fast. It would go. My brain wants to immediately default to the triplet pattern for the TKK. So you have to really force your body to not just default to the autopilot version, which is kind of a challenge sometimes, and you've been drilling things one way for a really, really long time. But I'll have to think about that. POTK. I'm going to open up my sound list. I'm going to put that in there so I don't forget. At one point, we're going to need to do a sound inventory check, which is where we go through this big spreadsheet that I created that keeps track of the beatbox sounds and patterns that I've created and used, because it's a way for me to keep track of everything, because I will forget if I don't write it down because I am old. But we're going to call this one POTK. And I think it's got potential because, again, it's really irregular combination. But if you can make it work, it would sound pretty unique. And looking at the spreadsheet here, oh yeah, this one, I had to look at the notation, but it is another thing I want to talk about before we get ready to move on to BGM creation. There's one last technicality pattern that I wanted to talk about because, again, it's one I don't hear very often. I know I'm not the first person to think of the combination of sounds because it's very basic and simple, but its effect is really interesting. And it's a simple light K snare chain. The way I have written here is actual combo, but the actual sound itself, it's very simple. In fact, people who are just learning can do this one because it doesn't require any sort of advanced technique or anything else. It's just taking a K or a C sound, depending, the consonant K sound, which becomes like a K snare once you start forcing it out further and getting more of a. I don't do my K snares that way outwards, so mine doesn't sound super sharp. But if you take that, it is basically just that plus a ko sound, but it's very light. And so you get the. That's the two-part combo in quotes is just those two sounds. It's a K and then like a ko. Very softly done as opposed to really forcefully done. I know it's a little bit of a difficult explanation, but when I put it into a beat, it'll make a little more sense. I'm going to change the notation here. This will make it a little bit easier for me to remember. I'm going to call it K-ko. It's a little more accurate to how it works. But the way this sound sort of plays out is it becomes a part of the filler chain for technicality. And it sounds almost 8-bit. It's like an 8-bit distortion. It's hard to describe. I could point out the sound in like an old school video gamey type of song, but it's difficult to explain. Hopefully when I actually demonstrate it, it'll make a little more sense. So doing like a K-ko pattern, again, it's just taking that and either adding one more sound or keeping it as a two-part and putting it into a beat. It creates a really interesting series of textures in the whole thing that I don't hear a lot, which is why I've been practicing it. It just sounds interesting to me. So if we think about just a sample cyclical beat using K snares and kicks, I'm going to run through a couple iterations and explain what I'm talking about here. So the way it sounds like and it's a K-ko kick pattern out of the middle of that is where that sound is being used. And it just sounds like again, it's a texture addition to the whole thing. It's not doing anything really complex, but slotting it in creates this variation. Again, I just don't see it very much. I'm sure tons of people have done it, but I don't see it combined that way. And you could do some really interesting speed things in that particular pattern. It's one of the ones I use to practice that because it's giving you a bit of practice on each component there, but then doing it over and over again is teaching consistency. So that pattern there, the is just one of my practice loops. And I do it a lot for that particular reason. But you can even add some micro changes in between where you're adding like a TKP or a really fast triplet pattern in beginning. That's teaching speed and practicing speed. So it's starting with a zip, actually. It's a zip hat. And the one I was just doing, the or kick zip, sorry. It's but if you swap in after the kick, instead of just a zip, a TKP triplet, you can make the pattern even faster. And it might not sound that different, but it feels different when you're practicing it, because instead of doing a one sound, then another sound, and then the keiko pattern into the kick and the snare, you're putting a really fast triplet in between. So let me see if I can demonstrate it real quick, and then to folks that are listening, you can tell me if it's obvious, because it feels very different when you do it, but it might sound really similar to the ear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat the first pattern a couple times, and then I'm going to switch it up and see, once I switch it up, you can hear at the beginning where it changes. So the bass one. And so the difference, you have, which is the bass one, and then you have, so the first part is the only thing that changes there, and it's really kind of subtle, but instead of going, it's going, so in one, instead of 1 1 4, it's going 1 3 4, because instead of it going just a zip, it's going kick TKP. And because it's so fast, it's kind of hard to hear. But maybe if I do them alternating, it'll sound a little more obvious. Again, this is a challenging way to practice, but I think it's pretty interesting and useful. So I'm going to do the same pattern, but I'm going to alternate the slight difference at the beginning, each one. So it's going to go normal one, then triplet, normal triplet. And that would sound like. And I think it's the additional hats that make it a little more obvious. But again, versus. Very interesting drill type to practice. And so I'll keep working with that a little bit and see how I build and refine and change things with it to create some interesting examples. I want to come up with a good equivalent for the POTO. I haven't thought about it a ton, but I will before we talk about this again, where it's a cyclical pattern that you just practice over and over again to drill, but it's using the POTO as a way to practice and get consistency with the sound. This example that I'm talking about, firstly, it's more of a way to get practice and then try this keiko combo, again, which is not common. But I think it's pretty useful, and it's helped me get more control over just those two sounds, because again, they're not hard. But by combining the keiko with different kicks, that's how you get this kind of texture range of sounds, and it sounds like. And you could speed it up too, which is one thing I've been working on, because it's just two sounds plus a kick chain. You could make that into a really fast, rapid pattern. That's one thing I'm working on getting better at, so I could put that into the drill beat and see how it changes. So more to come on that. That's something I'm developing right now, and it's fairly challenging, but it's really good practice. So to kind of wrap up the whole discussion on technicality, starting with the basic drills that are going to get control over the sounds is the first step. Well, first step is learning the sounds. Second step is constructing the drills that allow you to practice the sounds over and over again till you get comfortable doing them and get good control over having the sounds come out. And then the third step is figuring out how to combine the different sounds and patterns with other sounds and patterns to create new chains. And again, it's one of my favorite topics. There's a lot of overlap between these discussions whenever we talk about technicality, but hopefully you folks find it interesting, because each time we come back to it, I try and bring something a little bit new or a different nuance to the technique or something that I figured out. That way it's not just me talking about the same stuff over and over again. So we'll continue to talk about technicality in the future. And hopefully if we take these discussions and we look back, 2 years when I first started talking about it, we could see the progression, at least in what I do and what I use in my beats between then and now. That would be the end goal. So hopefully we get there. Now let's move on to some BGM brainstorming. I need to switch my sound devices so I can get my mic on a different input. So what I will do is switch my cables and switch my sound source, and then make sure everything with the synthesizer that's hooked up right now is feeding in and coming through on the broadcast, and then we'll roll from there. All right. You're going to hear a difference in sound levels. It's going to be a little bit louder, so I'm going to move the mic a little further away. But this is my regular mic setup for gaming. And then let's make sure we can hear the synth coming in through the loop. Take the boosts off so we don't get that feedback. Let's see, we got a Hydrate and Stretch from Sour Lad. I need to clear the redeems out. Need some water, or smoothie in my case. Okay, let me change my caption too before I forget again. All right, make sure we spell it right. I think one of my streams in the last month or so, I had a typo in my caption. I didn't realize it until I was putting the archive footage up on YouTube. I encourage you folks to call me out if I do anything like that, so I don't look like a moron. But I think we're good for now. If you put an exclamation point, let's do that. Hydrate says nope. Sorry, that says we can't read. Well, we'll all be morons together then. Okay. So what are we working on for BGM today? Usually we kind of jump around between styles and genres and whatnot. Today I want to experiment with some ideas for the future Halloween project. Not solely, but to start off, I want to experiment with some ideas for a more ambient, kind of dark experimental type track that we can slot into a Halloween release. Maybe at some point this weekend, if I have time, I need to sit down and do a big recording dump off the loop, because there's a lot of tracks that we've been working on here and stuff off stream that I've been doing that I need to record and start allocating to different upcoming projects. And after SOTS comes out, again, for the end of spring is when that project comes out, there's going to be another release in the summer, but I have not figured out what it's going to be yet. I think it's going to be a chill release. I need to start planning that one too. It's why I need to get the recording done so I can get the tracks to use edited, recorded, and ready to put into other projects. I think I have enough done to do another chill project similar to Neon Night Lounge from last year. And so that's probably going to be the next one after SOTS. And then after that, we get ready for the fall, and it'll probably be the Halloween project in October after that. I don't really have a strict schedule for my releases, but I try and space them out every other month or every couple months. It just depends on how much material I have, and when I'm working with commission artists, how that stuff shakes out. So we'll definitely see. I also have an idea for an EP that I want to release, which will probably be in between some of the larger ones. It'll be maybe like a 4 or 5 track EP. But to give you folks kind of a preview of what I want to do for that, it's going to be an entire series of songs that all feature my favorite synth. And they're not going to all be stylized the same way, but it's going to all feature synth 329, which is this one. It's called Square 2. I always forget the name. The synth is called Square 2, and it sounds like this. This is what I call the Sunsoft synth, because it reminds me of the old Sunsoft NES music from back in the day on the old consoles. But like the low end ones sound very much like that Sunsoft type bass line. And the upper octave ones sound different, but it still sounds like an instrument set they used back on those old games like Blaster Master. So you have like, and by messing around with all sorts of things like filters and other effects through the loop station here, you can really kind of alter the way the sound comes out, and it's pretty versatile, and I use it on a lot. I need to be careful not to use it everywhere, but it's so fun to establish bass lines and synth lines using this instrument set. And so the EP, it's probably literally going to be called 329, is going to be a bunch of tracks that prominently feature that instrument in all of the tracks. It'll be kind of like a fun themed one, which I haven't done in a while. But that's going to be in the near future. It'll be in between larger ones. I just don't know when. It could be between the chill one and Halloween. I just have to see how the timing works. But that's something we're looking at in the future. But to start, like I said, we want to go over something that's a little more kind of dark and ominous for like a Halloween type track. So I was thinking, since a lot of the stuff I've been doing is a bit higher BPM and tempo, we start with kind of a more slow type of rhythm and beat. 'Cause usually, in most cases when I'm recording and experimenting with the loop stuff, I'll do the rhythm first with the drums, and then rhythm, bass line, and then melodies and synths. So let's find a good sound set to start with, and then start putting things together. And what we could do is add a little bit of effect over things like the kicks and maybe the snares to give it a little bit more flavor. Let's go for this lower one and go for a bit of reverb on it. If we turn it all the way up, it'll sound like we're stomping in a cathedral. We don't really want that. Okay. And we can keep the reverb on for snares too. This is the room kit, which is kind of like a variation on a regular drum kit. So I was thinking of a kind of slower plodding beat with the kick and the snare, and then maybe adding in some other effects around the hats and other things, so it's not just going to be a kick and a snare. But for the bass rhythm, I'm thinking something slow, and then we try and bring in kind of more of an ominous or brooding type of instrument set to complement that. Because right now it just sounds like a slow beat. It has no mood. And I think using the bass line instruments and synths, we can come up with something. So let's capture the rhythm first, and then build everything around it and see how it develops. We could even add like a multiple kick towards the end, because I don't want it to be too slow and boring. But let's see what we can capture here, and then we'll loop it and see how it sounds. Money on my mother, mine. Cop 5 haircuts at the same time. White gold pants, jet ski made of wine. Foie gras bust of Albert Einstein, get money. Whoa. Red Dragon resubscribing at tier 1 for 6 months. Hey, thanks, dude. Much appreciated. Very kind of you. I try not to call a lot of attention to how long people have been resubscribed, but whether it's 1 month or 6 months, I appreciate all your folks' support. It's very kind of you. Okay, I'm gonna keep the playback about here. Let me know if you folks can't hear the different parts of the beat that we're constructing here. So we have it looping cleanly. I don't think we need to do it again. But now we want to add in some other instruments around the rhythm, like some hats. We could do, this is an open hi-hat. And we could add a little delay so that instead of just being a single hit, it's like a multiple hit, but it fades a little bit. All right, might have to tweak the delay settings itself. Let's see we up the millisecond delay. There we go. Maybe keep it about here. And by changing the feedback, it gives it a little bit of an echo. The delay setting, normally it causes things to kind of repeat and stutter. But if you change some of the parameters around the delay, you can drastically alter what it does. So that's why we're getting a little bit of an echo now. So what we could do is we could keep it there. And I want to drop this one down in the mix so it's not overpowering the rest of the rhythm. Maybe drop it a little bit further. And I think I want to sync it up to the snare itself. Actually, the first one I want synced to the snare. The second one I want to be right after it, so it kind of sounds like it's chasing the snare a little bit. Yeah, it sounds a little bit unusual, but unless we have it chasing the snare on both measures so it's consistent. Yeah, I think it sounds a little less weird. We'll do it that way. Okay, it sounds like a kind of a rustling, almost like a metal brush snare with a bit of echo and reverb on it. Or not echo, it's a delay. It's causing an echo. If we want to get really goofy with it, we could go cowbell. But I don't think I want to do that. It's like the SNL skit. No, we don't want to do goofy. All right, I think that'll do for the rhythm for now. Very simple, but slow and plodding with a little bit of ambience surrounding it with the hat. Now for the bass line. This is gonna really set the mood of the song. So let's see, look at the presets here. We could go for a string bass line. Maybe go for a synth string bass line instead of the regular strings to kind of switch things up. These are the synth strings. Not bad. We can go lower, going like low, kind of minor key. definitely sounds kind of ominous and brooding. Maybe go even lower. What's a possibility? I'm really low at the bottom end of the octave range on the keyboard. Maybe do 3. I kind of like the idea that it comes back up. So we start. And it comes back up here. We can have it cut off too. All right, let's experiment with that. We're gonna add guitar to bass to this to give it more of a low end. We'll see if it causes too much distortion. Go 50% on guitar to bass, not overpower it. Maybe a little less. All right, I think that'll work. Let's get it captured and then see what we can layer with it to kind of build out that bass line. We try and go up an octave too. I think that's too high. It's not bad. I think layering that as an upper octave complement might work, but I'm going to start at the low end. Just need to turn guitar to bass down a bit because it really causes it to rumble. We don't want to be too loud. So let's get it captured and we'll see what happens. Oh, that's why I had delay on. Yeah, that probably was why. Okay. Let's get it captured. All right. It almost sounds like the lowest end notes have a bit of a growl behind them, which I don't dislike. I just wonder if it's a little bit too distracting to the ear. Because on that second note, it comes in really aggressively. If it was in the background consistently, I might be inclined to leave it, but I think I need to drop the guitar to bass boost a bit and re-record that, because that second note right there, it just goes. I don't really want that. It sounds kind of weird. All right, let's fix it. It kind of oscillates, which I didn't really notice the first time. It kind of, that rumbling, which is caused by the low end of the guitar to bass, really boosting the actual sound. And I think it's because of the layering instruments on the synth strings themselves. If it was a single instrument, not several together, we probably wouldn't have that issue. So let me try a different one, like a flute or something that's one note. one instrument playing and see if that gets rid of that kind of rumbling, because it goes in and out, and I don't like the way it kind of comes in and out intermittently. All right, this is a flute. Well, the rumble isn't intermittent, but it's kind of distorted. That's a little better. All right, let's start with that. We can always layer some other things on top of it. Like one option we have that I've done before is we could take the strings and do the same notes, but don't put the guitar to bass on them so that we're getting that rumble. But we're layering in the instruments. And we could drop the mix down a bit on the volume on the strings so that they're just in the background. Pretty subtle. I don't know if it's really that audible when the volume is kind of down like it is, but you basically have the actual string parts kind of blending into the low flute, which is functioning like more like a string bass. But I think that's a pretty functional combination. Now, moving on to the high synths. We could go for something that sounds a bit more, again, looking for ominous and kind of moody. So what if we went for a chorus synth, where it's like sung voices? The chorus synth is useful for stuff like that. Let's see what we come up with. Got to be a little bit careful so that we don't create too dissonant of a melody here. This is the same note, the same final note as the bass line. It's just several octaves higher. I kind of like the idea of a chord with multiple notes. Maybe do the same progression, but we add in some kind of harmonizing notes. This is something I'm still kind of learning, because I'm not a classically trained musician. So if we took the exact same progression of notes as the bass line, that's what we would get. It would sound pretty much the same, just higher up with a different instrument. But I'm trying to noodle around here and come up with a good complementary series of notes. And maybe I should just do the first line, record it, and then experiment around once it's captured, because I don't know the sound theory behind things that create good harmonies off the bat. Oh, whoops! I need to let it stay quiet till the end of the repeat, or it's gonna loop faster. All right. Let me drop the volume down a little bit. Let's record that, and then we'll see how we can complement that series here. Now, one way that I've sort of created these harmonies, just because it's the most basic way to do it, is just to octave it lower or higher and layer it. But I kind of want to come up with something that does complement instead of just being the same notes lower down. That's what I usually do, but it's a lot harder. So we'd have to drop down a little bit further. There we go. That sounds like a little bit more complementary in progression, but maybe the first note is off slightly. Let's listen. Okay, it's either this one or the lower note. No, definitely the first one. Okay, let's go with the first one, and we're gonna drop it down in the mix so it's underneath the high choir synth. Could even drop it lower down on the octave, on the scale too. What would that sound like? Here's this without the one we just recorded. I think that creates a bit more variety. I'm inclined to do that. Okay, think that'll be functional for the choir synth. Let's save our work before we do anything else. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to add a more rapid synth to this that's going to have some movement in the background so it doesn't sound quite as slow, but not quite change the pace and tempo of the song because it's still going to follow the main rhythm. And I want to do like a staggered slice beat. So I think it's going to be number 6. Slicer pattern 6 is one we haven't used a ton, but I've been experimenting with it a lot for some of the recent stuff I've been working on, and it's kind of a fun one. It sounds different than just the single note, eighth, quarter, eighth, 16th, 32nd. So let's see what we can do. First, we need to find an instrument. And I think I want to go further up in the synth list. Ooh, this one is called Hollow. What I call the cave story synth. We might be able to do something with this. So let's get the beat playing, and then we'll add the slicer pattern. I'll try and demonstrate what I'm trying to do here. I think we want slicer plus delay or panning delay. Okay, that's 16th notes. So maybe we go 8th notes. Oh, this is 1, 2, 3. I want the one that sounds like a gallop. This is a... It's 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I want 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That one, This is going to sound like a hearing test for a second while I figure out which slicer pattern I'm looking for. It's closer. Is it 12? No, it's definitely not 12. Oh, so this is 1 and then triplets, and then 6 is 1, 2 and triplets. Well, they're kind of close. Yeah, Okay, that's tough. I thought I could get the one I was looking for right off the bat, but obviously I'm wrong on which one it is. Okay, let's keep it on 16. And we'll turn the beat on, and I'll see if I can sync it up just by listening, because I don't know which pattern it is now. And that could work. Because we're going to add a delay to it, which is going to cause it to stutter a little bit more. Let's go with this one for now. I don't know what note I'm going to use yet. But let's layer in delay. This is going to be kind of an experiment. Actually kind of a difficult one to work with. Got another idea. Going back to slicer pattern 1, because it's a little bit more consistent with its rhythm. This is just 16th note rapid cuts here. I don't know why the volume is so low though. And if you go with the delay, I think it's too fuzzy. Okay, this is kind of the pattern I was looking for. Now let's see if we can get it to line up and complement the choir synth and everything else so far. I don't know if we want it isolated like that though. I picked a complicated set of notes to try and work around. What I want to do is create a slight variation on the melody that we can have playing in the background. There we go. Here, I'm just going to boost the volume of the synth. That'll make it easier. And we're not going to have it isolated. Okay. I think that's functional so far. Now I have one track left for the loop. So let's see, what can we add as a final complementary instrument to this set? This sounds very kind of like almost gospel-y, but it's got, again, that sort of kind of dark and brooding mood over it. We could probably do some really interesting things by maybe applying some filter effects. Which can mute and drown out a bunch of the overall sounds. Oh, it's not applying to the beat, is it? You kind of lose the beat when you filter it like that. Let's go low pass. That'll keep some of the beat there intact. Okay, let's take a look at the other instruments on here and see if we can come up with a good fifth and final instrument and track to add. could add some straight chord progression to it. This starts with the 2-chord harmony based on the first one. But I wonder if it's dissonant. Yep, it's because of the low note. There we go. Black keys. I think the rhythm is off slightly. The rhythm of the chord progression is off slightly. But we can even move it down further. This is going to make it sound again kind of more gospel-y. But I don't dislike the way that sounds. Let me see if I can do it and capture it properly. I think I missed. Fortunately, I can use 2 hands because there's a bit of a gap before I have to reloop everything. All right, let me try and do that again correctly. There, that's better. I think if I'm thinking about the kind of final mix and how everything would be composed when I'm recording it, I think I want the rapid synth to be a little more prominent, so it's going to be probably the highest in the mix. This one, I think I know exactly what I'm going to use this one for. It does fit into the theme that I've been building for the Halloween project. I'm going to have to be a little careful with the volume on the beat, though, on the rhythm. Don't want it to be too overpowering, like way up in the mix at the top. So if anything, I'm going to have to boost the other ones and drop the volume of the rhythm down a bit so it's kind of more in the background. Okay, let's save that. That one will definitely serve a purpose. I needed a track that sounded like that for the list of things in the Halloween entry, but I hadn't quite figured out what I was going to do for it. So that'll work. Let's start a new one. We definitely have time to do at least one more. So let's save a new file and we'll switch up the energy a little bit. So we'll go, this is going to be 656. The reason why I wasn't asking folks for suggestions on what to call that last one is because based on the list of things I've written for the Halloween release, it'll have a name already. I just don't remember exactly which one. So let's clear off everything and we're going to start from the beginning. I think I want to do something a bit faster. Don't know exactly what mood we're going to go for yet. This one will kind of just let this one evolve organically, but I definitely want to go higher energy, faster beat. So maybe something like a dance, techno-ish beat. So let's see. This is the electronic kit. Oh, it sounds a little bit too heavy on the kick. Could mute it. This is putting a filter over it, which adds a little bit of a kind of metallic resonance to it. But I kind of like how it mutes out the kick. So we're going to establish the bass rhythm, and then we're going to layer the rest of the instruments on top. Hey, Ladybug's here. What's up, Ladybug? Welcome to the stream. Hope you're having a good Sunday. We are doing some BGM brainstorming and coming up with ideas for songs for future releases. This one's going to be a bit more dance focused, so we're currently trying to establish the bass rhythm and then flesh everything out from there. Yeah, how about kind of a stereotypical club kick line, and we'll kind of build around it and see what we get. We could do offbeat, hats. Again, I need to be a little careful because I've done this on a couple tracks already. We definitely have the staggered double at the end. I've done that before. I've done that before too. I don't want to do on the beat. Let's do off beats, but not vary at the end, since that's, again, a pattern we've used in other tracks before. Could have dropped that down in the mix a little bit. Now for the snare, we could go claps. Pretty standard, basic electronic type beat. What if we added a delay to it? Drop it down so it's not like rattling. We don't want that. We could double a snare at the end. That is not something I think I've done before. Let's try it. That's fun. I almost feel like the hats are a little too loud. But they're not louder than the snare, I don't think. Let's keep it like that for now. I think once we layer in the other instruments, it'll balance a bit. This one, I think we can do some fun things with the beat repeat, which by turning the beat repeat on here, we basically lose the snare because it's cutting a section of the rhythm. and basically it's dropping out the snare. So if we wanted to create kind of like a transitional alternate beat, we could do that just by hitting beat repeat. And if we start the repeat a little bit later, then we do get the snare, and we have it just on the ones and twos. But now let's go on to bass line. And this one, we might be able to use our slicer pattern and experiment with some of the other ones that are not just the single note cuts. Let's try dance bass first. And make sure we don't start in the same place as the last song we just finished. Not bad. We'll add in guitar to bass, boost the low end sound, make it really rattle the speaker. We'll see, that might be a little too much. Now slicer. Let's try 6 this time. On a 16th. Let's see. I think I like the rhythm of the slicer pattern here. It makes it sound kind of like it's galloping a little bit. Now the progression of notes. Let's see. We can have it go descend. Can have it descend. If it goes down 2 steps, I'm trying to think of what to do with it after that. We could do just 2 notes. But I'm trying to think if this is a progression I've used on something else. Oh, we can keep it there and maybe layer in some other instruments. I kind of want to use 329 again for this one, but let's get this capture first. Okay, let's cue up 329. Same notes. That sounds kind of cool. I don't think that sounds bad. We're creating Sunsoft tracks again. If you drop it lower in the octave. We could do both, actually. We could make them slightly different levels in the mix. See how that sounds. Sounds like it's missing the first note of the 329 synth. Yeah, I think it's missing it just at the beginning, and I already recorded one layer up, so I can't undo it. That's okay. It's not too distracting. All right, now let's think about what we're gonna do for synths. That's an idea. Let me up the volume of that synth mix a little bit. We could even change the slicer pattern. What if we did this? We're gonna do this similar note progression, just higher up with the same synth, but we're gonna add a bit of a panning delay distortion around it. So it's gonna ping a little bit in the sound channels. Thinking about how to bridge that last note. Yeah, that'll work. The first part's too soft. Let me tweak the panning delay settings, see if I can make it a little cleaner. Wow, you can go really high in the millisecond delay for this. Wow, that's kind of crazy. Yeah, I'm gonna boost this up to 320. This is a feedback, which I can't hear. Oh, let me stop everything. I think it's the kind of buzzing you hear. Yeah, it's a little bit more subtle for that effect. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right, let's get it to actually loop. Okay, next instrument. We could go for like a signal distortion, which conveniently is on one filter setting already. We need to choose an instrument to do it. There it is. I think we need to change the frequency to be a little faster, which I gotta figure out where that is. Oh, there it is, rate. Okay, there's only a little bit of variation that changes when we tweak that setting. And 100 could work. So if we did this, it'd be... That's not bad. We can probably take this and drop it way down in the mix in the background and have it come in and out. Since we repeated this over and over, I think it probably sounded annoying. Let's capture that. We'll leave it in the background, and then we would basically take it off and bring it back in kind of intermittently here or there. So again, it's not just beeping incessantly in the listener's ear. Let's go ahead and save our progress first. I think this thing is mostly constructed now. I'm trying to think of something to put on the last track. We got one more left. I know we didn't do this on the last one, which maybe I should have taken some time to break down how I'd want that one to be actually performed. But for this one, I think we would start with just the beat on its own. So it'd be... We bring in the bass. Then we drop the rhythm out for a sec, let the bass shine on its own. Give it one more repeat. And now we're going to bring the synth in. This one's probably going to be kind of an exercise in alternating different parts, taking some stuff out, letting other parts play concurrently, and then kind of jumping back and forth and switching things around. But for the fourth track, ooh, we could do something with that as an additional synth. Kind of sounds like a brassy, almost trumpet sound. I kind of like the idea of this is an alternate melody, so not playing at the same time as the regular rapid synth, because it would definitely clash note-wise. Let's test it. That's actually not bad. It's kind of a different melody. But we could layer it with a lower octave version too. We'll drop even lower in the octave than that. Kind of subtle kind of lower octave complement to the main one. Could even do like a build up to a drop, which I haven't done on a song in a while. That might be fun. It's a little more difficult to do when I'm recording these, because I have to time it perfectly. Otherwise, it'll get screwed up. But I think that's got potential. I kind of like that idea. I'll have to mess around with it a little more. And keep that one down in the mix so it's not quite as loud. It's kind of in the background. Interesting. That's what that higher synth pattern sounds like reversed. I think it, because it's doing the reverse, it doesn't follow the bass line that well. I think it clashes. If you don't listen to it carefully, you might be able to ignore it, but to me it sounds like it clashes directly with it. But it's kind of a neat way to flip things around. This is another option that we have when we're using the beat repeat. But it's currently applying that effect to every track. We only have the rhythm and the bass line playing, so that's all you hear. So it'd be kind of an interesting way to sort of add variation, kind of a mix-up part of the rhythm, but you have to be kind of careful because if you pick a different section to turn on repeat, it's basically taking a chunk of whatever you're playing and then it's repeating it over and over again. So if we do it when it's right after the snare, then we get the snare. That's how you can use the beat repeat effect to have like a repeated section that builds up to a drop, and then when you take it off, usually what I do is I'll switch out one of the other parts so that it sounds like the quote-unquote drop is another section of the song. So it'll be something like this. and then basically you take the drop or the beat repeat off, and then bring in whatever else you want as the actual, again, quote unquote, drop. And for outro, I don't know if we end with just the beat. Because that's how it starts. It would start with the beat, add the bass, add everything else, maybe have some transitions or drop type stuff in the middle. And then when we outro the song, we start pulling everything off and end with just the beat. That's one way to do it. Kind of like a parabolic arc for starting and ending similarly. So let's save that. That one's kind of fun. It was a little bit easier to write and construct that one than the last one we did. The last one was pretty challenging, but very different style. I feel like the dance techno-ish type stuff tends to come together a little bit easier because it's not quite as weird. Ladybug says, it makes sense. An ease to drop off can be cool. Yeah, I gotta take a look at the other ones and see, since I don't want to fall into the same tropes of like starting, stopping, ending the tracks the same way. Otherwise, it just gets really predictable and repetitive. Because another option we have would be to transition. Like, let's say we got the alternate part in a part B, so everything's playing. We let this part play out, and then we're transitioning to outro. Say we drop the beat first. And then we end with the bass line. That's another option. I've done that before too. So we have everything sort of, again, peel off and fade away into the background. We can even do it by dropping the volume fader, so it's not just a cut and they're gone. And then end with the bass line. We could do the same thing again. All three are playing. Drop the rhythm first. Now we drop the bass line out and end with the melody. And then we end with the high synth melody. That's another way to do it. A couple different options as far as how to end the track. So I'll probably have to experiment around and then look at some of the other stuff I've done and come up with something that's maybe not going to be just a carbon copy repeat of something else. But there's only so many permutations of how you can end a track. We could even do something more dramatic where it's all of them are playing at once, and we're just going to cut the track all at once with everything once the last repeat stops. And then that's the end. It's just abruptly, boom, cuts everything off when everything's playing at once. Could do that too. Just depends. So what we'll do is we'll save this. And for this one, if anybody has a suggestion for a name, since this one doesn't really have an intended place in the releases so far, it'll most likely go into a specific electronic themed release since that's the overall style. But for this one, since I don't really have a place for it yet, I can take suggestions for what to call it. Let me go grab my name document so I can capture anything you folks might suggest. Maybe something to do with the kind of rapid nature of the rhythm, especially the bass line. The bass line has this, again, fast kind of galloping energy and vibe to it. Let's see, where am I putting this here? Thinking back to some of the other ones we've done, excuse me, I don't think I've used the word rapid in anything so far, but thinking about things that we potentially pair it with, I know I've used the word pace. We have like step. I've used bass on several, so I probably don't want to name anything with the word bass in it anymore. I think I have 2 or 3 tracks that have that in some form. Same thing with signal. I think we've got one track that uses signal. I was thinking like rapid signal. We could do rapid transmission. I'd not use that word in anything yet. What do we think about that as a name? Specifically, this really small supplemental sound you hear coming and going throughout the whole thing. It does sound like a kind of signal or like a ping. Ladybug says transition seems neat. Did you mean transmission? Rapid transition, that's actually not terribly off base either, because this is going to have some kind of distinct phases as it goes from one to the other. But I am a little hesitant to use that word because it has alternate context to it, and I don't want to get in trouble. It could go with rapid transmission. I'm going to put it here for now. I can always tweak this slightly later if I have another idea or something pops in my head when I'm recording this. All right, let's save this. Yeah, I said transmission initially. Again, kind of building on the idea of this really subtle signal thing that you hear in the background. So we'll put this one on the records as rapid transmission. And again, I can double check my master list of tracks, make sure I didn't just forget about one that has that in there already. Oh, here's an effect that I didn't think about. Kind of curious just to see what would happen if we took the slicer effect and we applied it to the entire series of tracks, but I think it's just going to make it sound muddy and choppy, which is not really something we want to do intentionally for this one. But we'll go ahead and do one final save. I think that'll serve a good purpose for something in the future. So we didn't get a ton of tracks done today. Usually I average between 2 and 3, or maybe like 2 and 6 if we're doing the BGM rush. But the one before, I think I definitely am going to use for the upcoming Halloween project. I can jump back to that one if you want to hear it, Ladybug, since I don't think you were here when we started writing this one. But this is the more slow-paced, ambient, to me sounds kind of like gospel-y a little bit. It sounds almost like a ritual, which is kind of one of the themes for that project. So this one might be a little bit louder. We'll see. Let me keep an eye on the level so I don't blast your eardrums. Start with the beat. Bass line. Oh, I missed the bass line by like a measure. Wait. There it goes. And this one I don't think has alternate melodies. We'll just play them in sequence. First synth, or second technically. And then a supplemental chord progression in the last track. Almost sounds like an organ now that I think about it. It's not an organ instrument, but it kind of sounds like it. Well, this one, when we were working on it, it doesn't really do a whole lot that's complex. It has several different instruments that slightly iterate and change around the overall melody between the bass line, the kind of rapid synth you hear here, and the chord. And then everything drops out for one measure to let the beat just sit by itself, and then everything comes back in again. And so, I know what I'm going to use that one for. It's going to be part of the Halloween project, most likely. I just don't remember which title I'm going to give it yet, so I got to figure that out. But you can definitely look forward to seeing that one at some point soon. Sarlad says, bye, guys. All right, Sarlad, I'll catch you later. We're going to be wrapping up in a minute here and heading off to raid someone, but thanks for tuning in and hanging out with us today. And this is the last minute, stretch and hydrate. But on that note, let me go check out the list of folks I know. See if anyone knows online that we can go and raid. I see it. Lib is online. They are playing. I should probably mute my own stream, huh? They're playing Stardew? It says just chatting, but they also says Stardew on their caption. Let's go raid Lib. It's been a while. See how they're doing. So on that note, we will mute this and go to outro. And we will call that a stream for today. Actually, I need to cue this up too, 1 sec. There it goes. Okay. Now we're ready. So, thanks again, folks, for tuning in, hanging out. Well, we worked on some beatbox stuff and some music. Next week's schedule I got to figure out. It's going to be a little bit different because I've actually got a scheduled collab on the weekend. But that'll go live somewhere on Twitter and on our Discord before the end of the day today for sure. In the meantime, hope everyone has a good rest of your day. We will come back for some more shenanigans next week. But in the meantime, take it easy and let's go see how Lib's doing.